Mainstreaming Addiction Treatment Act, which enjoys overwhelming bipartisan co-sponsorship by members on this committee, would vastly expand access to safe and effective addiction treatment by eliminating the outdated and redundant requirement that healthcare providers obtain a special waiver from the DEA to prescribe buprenorphine for the treatment of addiction. Just last week, we hit another grim record in what has been decades-long losing battle against the scourge of drug addiction. 107,000 of our brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers were taken from us too early last year by drug overdoses. One all too common theme in these deaths is a lack of access to treatment. In our nation, the addicted, only about 1 in 10 individuals with opioid use disorder receives medications like buprenorphine to treat their addiction, despite this being recognized as the gold standard of care that cuts the risk of overdose in half. Let me repeat that. We have a safe and effective medication that reduces mortality risk by 50%, yet we have a healthcare system that delivers it to only the 1 in 10 eligible patients. That is a glaring systemic failure. One of the main reasons for this failure is the so-called X waiver, which requires healthcare providers that wish to offer buprenorphine for the treatment of addiction to submit to burdensome paperwork, record-keeping, and training requirements to obtain a special waiver from the DEA. All of this, despite the fact that at this very moment, healthcare providers can prescribe that exact same drug for the treatment of pain without a special waiver, and despite the fact that buprenorphine is less medically complex than commonly prescribed medications such as insulin and blood thinners. Because of these current barriers, we live in a country where 40% of counties, home to more than 20 million Americans, lack even a single physician that can prescribe buprenorphine for addiction. We live in a country where Black Americans, who are disproportionately at risk for opioid overdose, are significantly less likely to have healthcare providers in their neighborhoods who offer buprenorphine. Can you imagine how quickly we would be acting if insulin wasn't available in more than 40% of counties or some of the most high-need neighborhoods? This is the life or death crisis that we are facing. In recognition of the absurdities of the existing system, both the Trump and Biden administrations took executive actions to reduce the burden of the X waiver and expand access to treatment, but were limited in their ability to do so by existing statutory requirements. Just this week, Jim Carroll, head of the Office of Drug Control Policy under former President Trump, called on Congress to pass the MAT Act and once and for all eliminate the X waiver. Today is our chance to answer that call and to do so in a resoundingly bipartisan fashion. In my conversations with members of this committee on the amendment before us, I've heard of two primary concerns that I wanted to preemptively address. First, some have raised the concern that this legislation would increase illicit diversion of buprenorphine. This is false. The Drug Enforcement Agency and everyone else who has looked at this issue has found that the primary reason for buprenorphine diversion is the failure to access legitimate treatment, and that increasing and not limiting buprenorphine treatment may be an effective response to the diversion of buprenorphine. To that end, we heard these exact same diversion arguments when this committee took decisive action to expand access to buprenorphine in both the 21st Century Cures Act and the Support Act. And as the committee has taken these actions, illicit diversion of buprenorphine has fallen over the past 5 years. Increasing access to legitimate treatment decreases illicit diversion, full stop. The diversion argument is nothing more than a red herring, which is why legislation has been supported by major law enforcement organizations, including the National Sheriff's Association and the National Association of Attorneys General. Second, I've heard concerns that eliminating the X waiver requirement will reduce the quality of addiction treatment by eliminating existing training requirements. To be clear, any healthcare provider who would be authorized to prescribe buprenorphine for opioid use disorder under this legislation can already prescribe the exact same medication for pain today, as well as the powerful opioids that got us into this crisis in the first place. Furthermore, under the MAT Act, healthcare providers will still have to meet state licensure requirements and obtain a standard controlled substance license from the DEA to prescribe the medication.